Alright everybody, today I am here with Michael Koryta, and ironically, two Cleveland connected people are hanging out right outside of Pittsburgh.
Don't admit that.
Michael just finished his event at the Mystery Lovers bookstore, and we're going to talk a little bit about his new book, So Cold the River. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about Michael as a writer. And you had a lot of changes this year between shifting your genre, you have a new publisher, and you've gone to working full-time as a writer.
Yes.
So, tell me what's the most unusual or unexpected thing, events, occurrence that have been good or bad that came from all this change?
I'd say writing in the supernatural. I intended So Cold the River, as you know, to be a novella. It grew into a novel, and that led me to writing another book in that same sort of thread where I'm trying to blend crime fiction with some elements of supernatural and horror, and that wasn't something I anticipated doing for one book, let alone for multiple books. So that was the big surprise of the last year.
Cool. Alright, so we've talked before about the fact that you used to juggle a lot of different things at the same time. You were teaching, and you were working as a PI, you were working as a journalist. So now you have a lot of extra time. What do you do to make sure you keep your eye on the ball and not procrastinate? Because you said you dedicate that you need to write every day.
Right. It doesn't. It actually doesn't feel like a lot of extra time. One of the changes, it's a great thing with Little Brown. By switching over to Little Brown, one of the changes I've discovered is that there's been a lot more touring activity, and then as the backlist, the St. Martin's books have picked up some following overseas. I've had international tours and things like that to occupy time. I also started writing a little bit faster in the first year that I was writing full-time, and the result of that is that I've got books coming out quicker now. So I've got copy edits going on one while I'm touring for another and trying to finish the first draft of the third. So all of the free time that I envisioned disappeared pretty quickly.
Okay, you mentioned your overseas travels, and this is the first time you've done that, right?
Yeah.
Book tours overseas, anyways?
Yes, I was in. I did a tour last year in Paris, and then this year it's been Australia and Amsterdam.
And how do they compare to your U.S. tours?
It's great. It's a thrill to see how people respond, to the work in other places. In France and in the Netherlands, they seem to read crime fiction very much as an American social commentary. Writers like Pelicanos, Dennis Lehane, Michael Connelly all stand out and do very well over there, and they're very interested in the social commentary aspects of crime fiction, which isn't non-existent here, but it seems heightened over there to me. And then Australia was just fantastic. The people were great, the beer was great. What more could you ask from a country? Now
you met one of your idols over there, didn't you? Was it Australia that you met her?
Which one are we talking about? I met Elizabeth Kostova, who wrote The Historian.
And was she the one you put on your blog? The picture on your blog?
Exactly.
Okay.
She was in Perth. That was exciting. And there's so many great, really fantastic writers over there. Irvin Welsh was over there. The Perth Writers Festival is a really neat opportunity. The other book that was one of my favorites last year is a book called The Good Soldiers by David Finkel. And David Finkel was also in Perth, so a lot of my favorite writers from the States I managed to catch up with in Perth, Australia of all places.
So
a little unusual.
Ways to travel.
Exactly. I caught him in the Indian Ocean. I finally tracked him down. What was the question?
Do you write start to finish?
I always have. I write a really ugly first draft in general, and then go back and do many rewrites. I don't outline, but my first drafts are so terrible that in a lot of ways they're 400-page outlines. The one exception to that would be So Cold the River, and that the first thing I wrote from that book was a floating scene. It's the moment when Eric's driving between the two hotels, between the two towns, and he sees the leaves swirling and stops to film the leaves, and then you begin to hear the violin and the train that's coming in. So it's the first of his really intense visions upon reaching the towns. And I actually wrote that. I can't write when I travel to save my life, but I wrote that in the Atlanta airport. And I knew it wasn't going to be where I'd open the book, but the image stuck out to me, and I wanted to just get something down on paper. I wanted to get this idea of that moment where he captures the leaves and he gets out and tries to film them and then realizes the camera's not recording the leaves, that what he's seeing is different from what the camera is seeing. And I think I wrote about 2,000 words in the Atlanta airport, which for me is, I usually have to be at my desk, have to have everything set up as normal. So that was the one exception.
Okay, note to Little Brown, send Michael to Atlanta more often.
That's not something we need to do. The Atlanta airport is not one of my favorites. So.
Well, and that's interesting because I wondered how difficult it would be for you if you're writing and because you have several different perspectives in So Cold the River, and having to transition. Do you stop when you finish a perspective, when you're going to transition to a new perspective, or do you...
Do you mean for the day?
Right.
No, so it depends on I write 1,500 words minimum every day. And so sometimes that 1,500 might just be in one point of view. Sometimes it could be depending how quick I'm making the cuts, it could be in 3 points of view. But it's all, I judge my stopping point on a minimum word count. There are days when it's going really well, I'll write 3,000 words, but I won't let myself stop until I hit 1,500.
So how does that transition work for you? Like, do you have to kind of slow down and go into a different mindset, or?
Depends where I am in the book. Early on, it's more challenging because I haven't really familiarized myself with the characters' voices yet, and so early on, it's sometimes a little more halting process. The transition's more jarring. By the time I get to the last act, I usually am so in touch with the voices of the characters at that point that I can transition pretty quickly. And to me, in a multiple point of view book, it's all about the scene moment, which lens is right for that scene, that point in the story. And so I view it almost as a camera, panning from one point of view to another. And so I'm really guided by the moment of the scene and where we are in the story.
Okay, you talked about not outlining, and you said that your first draft is usually 400-page outline.
Yes. It's one way to look at it.
Do you do a lot of the revisions yourself before it ever goes on, or do you start passing it back and forth?
No, I probably go through 3 rewrites at least before anybody sees it. Sometimes in the book I'm working on now, I'm doing major overhauling before I've finished the draft. In other books, I've gotten the first draft done completely and then gone back to rewrite. But by the time my editor sees it, it will have been through several rewrites.
Did you, with your journalism background, did you find that you were doing that as a journalist too, or is this something that's just pretty unique for you as a novelist?
It's so different just because of the length of the piece, but journalism was certainly a huge help in that you learn how to write clean copy on deadline, but it's also an exercise in the essence of good writing is being able to transmit a clear thought from your head to the reader's head, or a clear visual image, to be able to set the scene. And I did a lot of rewriting on the fly in journalism because you have to. So that newspaper training was definitely a help.